If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member today. Members get early access to videos, access to all the stream VODs, and exclusive access to emotes as well. So if you'd like to support the channel, become a member today. All right, Matt Walsh. Matt Walshed up. Let's hear what dumb shit you have to say today.
Well, for those who don't follow football, the NFL playoffs are currently underway. My Baltimore Ravens are playing on Saturday against the Houston Texans, and that's neither here nor there. I just want to mention it, because I'm excited about it. Much to my chagrin, nobody in the audience cares about football.
Gee, Matt, you like watching a bunch of buff, muscular men run around in matching outfits and little tights, tackling each other, wrestling each other over some balls? That sounds kind of gay, doesn't it? Sounds a little gay.
You don't care about football and you don't care about aliens. And those are like half of the things I care about. And yet somehow we make this relationship work. I don't know how we do it, but we do. So anyway, for the teams who didn't make the playoffs, it's been a bit of a bloodbath for coaches. Lots of coaches are getting fired, as always happens at the end of the regular season. The difference is that this time you got some legendary coaches that are getting the boot, including Bill Belichick from the New England Patriots. After 475 years as their head coach and after winning like 83 Super Bowls or whatever it was, he's now gone. And a few days ago, his replacement was announced. And the guy taking over is named Mayo. He's 37 years old. He's a former player. He has no head coaching experience. He has very little coaching experience in general. And he's the guy they're bringing in to take over the most successful, take over for the most successful NFL coach of all time. So we'll see how that works out. I'm guessing it will work out very poorly. That's my prediction. In fact, I'm even more sure that it will work out poorly after watching the introductory press conference for the new coach yesterday. Mayo, I guess we should mention now, is black. And that's a fact that...
Gee, I wonder if that has anything to do at all with Matt assuming that the guy's just gonna do bad and be a bad coach.
And that's a fact that shouldn't matter and shouldn't even be notable, especially in the NFL when like 70% of everybody in the NFL at every level is black. But it does matter because it became, of course, a focal point during the press conference, which in turn made the press conference a subject of discussion on social media with lots of people sharing their opinions about it. So first of all, just as context, it may be worth noting that Mayo explained in his opening remarks that after retiring from the Patriots as a player, he was first a player and now he's a coach, but as retiring as a player, he initially left football and went to go work in the financial field. And it was while working in finance that he learned a valuable lesson that will help him as an NFL coach. And here he is explaining that lesson.
I took a break. I went to Optum. I needed a break from Bill. I went to Optum for about 4 years. And I came back. And one thing I came back with, I learned a lot at Optum. Larry Renfro, Mike Mateo, those guys. I learned a lot at Optum about diversity, right? About diversity and inclusion. And you better believe it, being the first black coach here in New England means a lot to me.
Oh no, Matt Walsh is not gonna like this. Anytime we have conversations about diversity and inclusion, Matt Walsh gets very uncomfortable. Don't ask yourself why.
But those guys taught me you have to take ideas from other people. Black, white, green, yellow, it really doesn't matter. Old, young.
Yes, this is an NFL head coach taking over for the greatest coaching legend in the history of the sport, explaining how he learned about the importance of diversity and inclusion while working in finance.
So, for example, there are studies that show banks, for example, when utilizing diversity, when banks have more diverse managers and more women involved and more diversity in the company, those banks tend to do better and perform better. That's a financial thing. That's the financial industry. And that's a very real study also, by the way. Yeah, you could absolutely have learned the importance of diversity and inclusion while working in finance. How is this so crazy for him to possibly comprehend? Not to mention, if you're working in finance, what sector could you have potentially been kind of put in a position where you're forced to recognize the disparity between wealth when we're talking about white people on average compared to black people on average?
If you are a Patriots fan, it's hard to imagine a more discouraging thing to hear from the new head coach of your team.
Yeah, it's so discouraging to hear that diversity is important.
I mean, there are worse things, I guess. He could have said that he learned about diversity and inclusion from, watching Dylan Mulvaney TikToks.
He also noted that I am an ape and I should go F
They could have
myself.
actually hired Dylan Mulvaney to coach the team. That would be worst of all. We're not quite there yet. We'll be there in a few years. So that's where we are now. But
That's the worst you could think of. What if he said he learned about diversity and inclusion from you, Matt? Now we're talking about a really bad outcome.
in any event, this comment about diversity and inclusion, I think, lends some context to what happened next. During the media questions, during that portion of the event, when they took questions, Mayo and the owner of the team, Robert Kraft, were asked, of course, about the significance of Mayo being a black head coach. And Robert Kraft gave basically a good answer. He said that he hired the best man for the job, and that man just so happened to be black. He said that Mayo's color is not relevant to him. Like, he wasn't looking to hire a black man. He was just looking to hire the best guy, and this is the best guy in his opinion, happens to be black. It doesn't matter. So that's the right answer. Like, that's the correct answer. That's a good answer. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if that's actually accurate. I'm not sure if they hired the best man for the job or if they were looking to make a diversity hire. We do know that the NFL does a whole hell of a lot to incentivize/force teams to at least consider quote unquote minority candidates. And I have to say quote unquote minority candidates because, again, in the context of the NFL, black men are not the minority. So those are not minority candidates by any stretch.
It's not talking about minorities within your company. It's talking about minorities within the country.
Imagination in the NFL. But anyway, that's the answer that he gave. And we have no reason to believe that it's not true. But Gerard Mayo himself had a different take. In fact, in his answer, he kind of rebuked indirectly the owner who was sitting right next to him. And he said this. Listen.
I do see color because I believe if you don't see color, you can't see racism. And whatever happens, black, white, disabled person, I've always, even someone with disabilities, I always, for the most part, people are like, when they're young, they kind of make the spot hot. Younger people know what that means. But what I would say is, no, I want you to be able to go up to those people and really understand those people. So it goes back to whatever it is, black, white, yellow, it really doesn't matter, but it does matter so we can try to fix a problem that we all know we have.
Okay, now
Okay, that made a lot of sense to me. Yeah. It's not just about not seeing color, I'm blind to the color of people. It's more about this can be someone's skin color. What is their story? What is the experience that they've had? If you really want to understand that person, that will be relevant. So he's saying that if you want to understand someone's struggles, if you want to understand the way that racism is still affecting people, you do need to be aware of color, not see it to a detriment, not just judge people on the basis of their skin color. Of course not. However, you need to be willing to recognize the skin color of some people. For example, when we talk about black people disproportionately living in poverty, well, the fact that they're black is pretty relevant there. So yeah, in that case, I do see color. So it's more just a conversation about how this colorblind thing, in theory, the incentive is very nice. Unfortunately, the world is not ideal, and we don't live in a perfect world. And even if you decide that you're not going to see race, the way that society operates right now, it still sees race. And people are still facing negative consequences because of their race. So even if you choose not to see race, it doesn't stop the actual issue.
Okay, now, as I said, that clip went viral, and lots of people did not like Mayo's statement that he does see color. That's the thing people are kind of focusing in on, is that he said that he does see color. But that's not the problem here. Okay, that is not the issue with what he said. Of course he sees color. We all do. We all notice the races of the people that we are interacting with. Saying that you don't see color it's nonsensical. It's like saying you don't see height. Well, I don't see height. I don't even notice.
I thought he said the guy before that said, I kind of just don't see color, whatever. I thought you said that that was the right answer.
Well, I don't see height. I don't even notice it. Like, of course you notice it. If somebody's short, you notice it. If somebody's tall, you notice it. Of course you do. In fact, every time you look at someone...
Usually when people say I don't see color, they don't mean that they literally don't see color. Of course they do. I think that they mean they're not going to let that affect anything whatsoever when it comes to their assessment of that person, which again is probably the better thing to do when you're dealing with people individually. However, when it talks about the relevance of seeing color, it's about understanding how that may have affected their experience.
You notice these facts about them. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to pretend and should not pretend that we don't notice other people's races.
Yeah, but sometimes you notice other people's races, and then there are subconscious things that play out because of that. You might subconsciously feel a little bit uneasy and unsafe around this person. Maybe they are going to rob you. It's getting kind of late. It's just you and this person. I don't know. Sometimes those subconscious preconceived biases come out without even realizing that you have them. So it's not about whether or not you see color. It's also what happens to you when you recognize someone else's color.
It's completely silly. So that part is fine. The rest is the problem. Because first, the reason why he says he sees color is well, if the reason had been, well, I do see color because I have eyes, and it's a fact about someone that
Again, what it means to see color is more than the literal sense, Matt. God.
Can see, and so I do see color. If he had said that, then that would be fine. But instead, he says that he sees color so that he can stop racism. Well, it's 2024, and
yeah, what he means by that is if you don't see color and you don't take into account for the relevant factors of someone's race, then you cannot address racism or systemic racism. It's actually pretty simple.
So this guy is, according to him, constantly on the lookout for racism. Even though as a black...
What? Did he say he was constantly on the lookout for racism? Did he actually ever say that?
NFL player turned coach who is 37 years old and has been a star athlete all his life, he is unlikely to have ever encountered very much racism. Okay.
How do you know this?
And in fact, it's like almost all but guaranteed that I have encountered more racism than he has.
What?
In fact, that's like definite. And in the
What
context...
is this, the oppression Olympics? Matt, how have you faced more racism? Do you know this guy's story? When did he start playing sports? Did he come from a poor background? How do you know this? You just assume, dude. God. Yep, Matt Walsh, guys. He's been a victim of racism more than this black guy. How does he know this? He doesn't. He just has a feeling in his tummy.
Context of being an NFL player, like as an NFL player and now coach, you're not encountering any racism at all, ever. Like it just doesn't exist there.
You literally don't know this.
Yet he's constantly on the lookout for it, he says.
Matt, you played us the clip, and now you're saying he said something that wasn't in the clip.
This is what it means to value diversity and inclusion, after all. I mean, that's what it means. He said he values diversity and inclusion, and now he's explaining what that means. And this is what they taught him.
It means being aware of how color can play a role in certain people's experiences and how racism is still a factor. That's all he said. That's literally all he said. The most mundane, mild, timid little thing. And you're up here pissing yourself over it, Matt. You're such a little bitch baby.
In finance. Instead of teaching him, finance. Also, just the idea
What
that
is this two-dimensional mindset? Maybe he learned about finance and the importance of diversity. Nope, you can only learn one thing at school.
anything significant at all about hiring a black coach is, of course, absurd. Again, 70% of the NFL is black or more. There are many black coaches.
The NFL, yeah, but how many coaches? It could very well be significant. The own NFL website says NFL hits highs in diverse executives, lacks in head coaches, while continuing to face criticism and a lawsuit for lack of representation among head coaches. So see how dishonest and weaselly this Matt Walsh little scumbag is? He's over here like, well, 70% of the NFL is black, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, how many of those people are coaches? Critics point to the sidelines where there are only 3 black head coaches in a sport that had 56.4% black players in 2022. So even his 70% number was off. Oh, sorry, this is black players. So maybe the entirety of the NFL is made up of more than, yeah. But either way, he's so dishonest.
There are plenty of black head coaches in the history of the league and today.
Now we know he's just lying, and we know that he knows his audience is too retarded to ever actually go and look this up.
Now, there are fewer black head coaches by proportion, which who cares? Just like there's fewer white people by proportion in pretty much every other position in the NFL or on the sidelines. But how do you end up with more white head coaches than black? Well, it's because a black person who is involved in football and interested in football at that level is just more likely to get into the business as a player. And like going back, going
Aren't there a good number of coaches that were former players anyway?
back through childhood. If you have a black child who's very interested in football, the proportions tell us it's more likely that they're going to get involved as a player. Whereas if you have a white kid,
Wouldn't you have a wait?
there's plenty of white kids that play football, but as you go up and up and up, it becomes a less and less white sport, shall we say? And so, for white people, if they want to remain involved in the sport at that level, they're more likely to do it on the sidelines. Like that's the way it works out.
What? So because there's a lot of black players, that's forcing white people to want to be the coaches instead? You see, the white brain is just more capable of coaching football.
And both groups are making millions of dollars. Both are doing fine, whether they're players or coaches. So we don't have to worry about either one of them. And there's no racism involved here. But the greater issue, I think, is just the idea that we need this guy to pontificate about racial issues in the first place. I mean,
We don't need this guy. Wasn't there a question asked in regards to this? Somebody asked about the significance. Yeah, they're going to talk to them about that.
listen to what he said. Listen to what he actually said. So I took the liberty of transcribing it. And here's
Which
what
is going to be, Matt Walsh is going to give a very dishonest interpretation of what he said.
he actually said. Quote, whatever happens, black, white, disabled person, I've always, even somebody with disabilities, I always, for the most part, people are like, when you're young, they kind of make the spot hot. Younger people know what that means. But what I would say is like, no, I want you to be able to go up to these people and really understand these people. So it goes back to whatever it is, black, white, yellow, it really doesn't matter, but it does matter. So we can try to fix the problem that we all know we have.
Okay.
Now, I'm not trying to be funny here. I have no idea what any of that means. Okay,
So you're just retarded then. This is a very classic form of Republican argumentation, which is essentially saying, because I'm too stupid to understand, that means it's wrong. Matt, just because you're a dumb does not mean that what that guy said was actually meaningless. No, I will give you that, yes, it was a little bit convoluted, and it sounded like he stuttered a little bit. It sounded like he was saying like and like a lot at first especially, but it sounded like what he was saying is that people used to say stuff about disabled people, like they make the spot hot, like a kind of corny incentive that like they're cool or whatever. But he wants people to have a deeper understanding of minorities. He doesn't want it to just be this sort of virtue signaling like, oh, it's cool, LOL, or whatever. He wants people to actually be able to understand individuals and understand how being marginalized may have affected them and whatnot. And by being aware of that, that can then open the door for a conversation on how to fix the broader systemic issue. That's what he was getting at, clearly. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to listen to that quote and understand generally what he was getting at.
There's not one coherent thought in that whole jumble. It's just babbling nonsense. Doesn't mean anything. We understand the basic gist that he's trying to articulate some anti-racism thing because he starts off by saying, I do see color, we got to spot racism. Like that part. And so that we can guess that the rest of it is trying to elaborate on that point, but it doesn't actually make any sense. If I were to read you that transcript and without any context, you would honestly, again, not trying to be funny, you would honestly assume that I'm reading a transcript from somebody who was having a stroke, or you would think it was a Joe Biden speech, which.
I mean, I feel like I'm listening to somebody have a stroke every time I listen to you make a video.
Which is basically the same thing. Now, here's the point. I don't blame Gerard Mayo for that. He's a football coach. He was a player before that. And for all I know, he'll be a great football coach. Again, I'm skeptical.
You literally said you don't think he was going to be, but okay.
I'm guessing it will work out very poorly. That's my prediction. In fact, I'm even more sure that it will work out poorly after watching the introductory press conference for the new coach yesterday. He could end up being, plenty of coaches that have been hired at that age, and end up being great coaches. So it could be a great coach. He knows plenty about football. He knows a lot more than I do about it. But he's not a social commentator. Okay, he's not a philosopher. That's why we don't need any time. You got any of these people.
He was asked the question. What? This guy isn't trying to get on a radio station, okay? He's not starting his own syndicated political show. He was asked a question that related to the fact that it's pretty unique that he is a black man being put in a position as of head coach in the NFL.
Most of the time, you get these people in sports, they're asked some question at a press conference. Tell us about the significance of the racial this and that. What they have to say is, if you can even understand what they're trying to say, it's like the dumbest thing you've ever heard. Because this is not what these people.
He's just insulting. He hasn't even said anything of substance.
This is not their job, right? And this is not. They live their lives obsessed with football. This is all they think about is football, which makes a lot of sense if you're in the football business. But we don't need these guys to give us sermons. And in fact, it would just be better if they didn't. It really would be.
It's funny how his main complaint was that it was hard to understand what that guy was even getting at, but yet, what was Matt's argument? Literally, what was it? It was just him denying stuff, saying nuh-uh, and then that's it, kind of? Like, systemic racism is a thing. Black people are disproportionately given the death penalty compared to white people that commit similar crimes. Why is that? Why is it that if you have a black-sounding name, you're less likely to get a call back on your resume compared to people with the exact same qualifications who just have the name like Jake or a white-sounding name? Why is that? Okay, clearly these are certain issues. Being colorblind is not going to solve those problems. You need to be aware of how color can still play a role in affecting people's decision-making. And then from that point on, you can address the problem. That's the solution here. But Matt was just like the typical convoluted ape. But then again, that is Matt Walsh for you.